You've seized Egypt, defeated the Persian king, and the world kneels before you. But with divinity declared and rebellion brewing, is ultimate power really worth it? If you were Alexander, what would you sacrifice next? The answer will surprise you. You grew up in the orbit of an unstoppable force. Philip of Macedon wasn't just a conqueror, he was the man who turned Macedonia, once little more than scattered villages, into the beating heart of a war machine. His victories weren't just battles won, they were nations reshaped. Illyria, Thrace, Thessaly, territories that had once threatened Macedonia, now carried the scars of Philip's campaigns, their rebellions crushed, their leaders forced into uneasy alliances. He used wealth as fluidly as he used his sword, showering gold upon enemies one day and sieging their cities the next. There were moments you marveled at him, even loved him for his unshakable power. And yet, that same power suffocated you. How could anyone escape the shadow of a man who had made gods of war seem almost human? When he was home, the palace brimmed with life. Feasts that roared with drunken boasts, soldiers singing about the spoils of war. You sat quietly beside him, watching how he commanded the room without trying, how even seasoned generals turned into eager disciples under his gaze. Sometimes your gut ached with envy. What had they seen in him that they didn't yet see in you? But most of the time, he wasn't there at all. His wars dragged him across the mountains of Illyria or the coasts of Byzantium for months, even years. You learned by studying his movements, watching his generals, and deciphering his victories like they were puzzles. You studied Aristotle with the focus of a soldier sharpening a blade, but your mind wasn't satisfied with philosophy alone. You absorbed tactics from generals, war stories from old campaigners, and even poetry from bards who wandered into the palace. You listened to everything, filed it all away. The first time you truly stepped out under Philip's gaze was the day you tamed Bucephalus. The horse, wild-eyed and untouchable, had sent the other men reeling in failure. They mocked you when you approached him, just a boy. Yet you saw what others missed. The horse feared its own shadow. You calmly guided him into the sunlight, gentled him, and mounted his back, sending everyone into stunned silence. Philip's face was unreadable at first, but his words cut through the air. "My son, you must find a kingdom worthy of you. Macedonia is too small." A compliment, yes, but also a challenge. Too small for you? Or too small for us? When Philip remarried, everything shifted. The wedding to Cleopatra, a noblewoman decades younger, wasn't just about romance. It was a strategic move to cement alliances. But it shook your position. During the wedding feast, her uncle sneered about the offspring she would bear, true Macedonian heirs. Rage boiled inside you, and you let it spill over. A drunken Philip lunged at you with his sword, only to stumble to the floor, humiliated by his own inebriation. This, you thought, is the man the world fears? The next day, you left the court. Your mother, Olympias, always ferocious in her ambitions for you, called it treachery. But whispers filled the halls. The heir's position had suddenly cracked open. You were no longer assured anything unless you claimed it. Then came the blow that changed everything. Aegae, the royal capital, awoke to find Philip collapsed in the theater. A dagger had pierced him where no guards stood close. You froze when the news reached you, just for a moment. The assassin was quickly cut down, but the echoes of his death rattled louder than the blade itself. Who planned this? Was it your mother, famous for both her cunning and her fury? Did you know about it? Or worse, did you help orchestrate it? You never answered. Instead, you acted. Before Philip's body had cooled, you swept into Pella with the precision of a storm. The treasury was yours within hours. The army, still casting nervous glances at one another, swore loyalty under unflinching orders. For those who hesitated, you made the stakes clear. Macedonia was no longer Philip's world. It was Alexander's. If Philip was a hammer, you had chosen to become the blade. Something faster, deadlier, and most of all, unshackled by his legacy. Because even as you prepared to inherit his ambitions, one truth burned inside you. You could never just continue his story. You had to surpass it, and that meant making the world forget him altogether. At 13, your father did something remarkable. He didn't summon a general to hone your sword arm or a king to teach you diplomacy. He called upon the most brilliant mind of the age, Aristotle. He wasn't sent to the palace where gold-threaded ceilings might distract or flatter. Instead, he met you at the Temple of the Nymphs, a quiet place sheltered by trees where the air was thick with the scent of soil and wildflowers. It was there, in this grove of reason, that the seeds of your future were sown. From the start, Aristotle treated you not as a student, but as a challenge. He asked questions that coiled around your mind and poked at your intuition. Logic, ethics, metaphysics, every idea was a mountain you had to conquer. When he spoke of astronomy, you didn't just learn the stars, you learned how to calculate your place among them. Medicine was more than herbs, it was life and death compressed into every decision. Poetry became more than mere words, it breathed power, emotion, legacy. To you, these were not mere lessons, these were weapons. But it was Homer's Iliad that burrowed deepest into your soul. Achilles, with his blazing wrath and battle-born glory, felt less like a character and more like a shadow trailing you as you walked through Aristotle's world. You didn't just memorize his story, you embodied it. The unstoppable warrior, driven by fate yet cursed by it. This wasn't a hero to admire, it was a mirror. The words bound you so tightly that you kept them by your side, under your pillow at night, as if within the pages lay the key to your own immortality. Still, Aristotle kept drilling into you ideas that tested your growing ambition. He insisted on the superiority of Greeks over barbarians, the natural hierarchy of intellect and civilization. Reason over chaos, he would say, mapping the world in lines both clear and rigid. You nodded, absorbing the ideas, but also plotting beyond them. The so-called barbarians, Persians, Egyptians, Indians, weren't just inferiors to conquer. In your eyes, they were pieces of a vast puzzle waiting to be organized and ruled. Not just defeated, but woven into something greater. And as he filled your mind, he also taught you the practical tools of survival. Plants became your allies or enemies. Their leaves either healed or killed. He showed you to diagnose the fevers that burned through armies and to read the heavens for navigation. While your companions wrestled with spears and shields, you sharpened your intellect until its edge rivaled any blade. You weren't becoming a warrior, you were becoming an entirely different kind of force. But despite your respect for him, friction crept in. Aristotle valued moderation. You craved the unlimited. He admired balance. You pursued greatness. His ethics whispered restraint, while your gut screamed for excess. You spoke of empires sprawling across continents. He told you to rule wisely. The tension grew large enough to fill the grove, but neither of you spoke of it directly. For all his brilliance, Aristotle was still rooted in the idea of legacy through teaching. You were chasing something harder to define, a legacy so immense it would annihilate any who dared to compare themselves with it. Before you parted ways, he gave you a gift, an annotated copy of the Iliad. It was not a token gesture, but a statement of trust. This book accompanied you everywhere, into battles, through deserts, beside you even in the vast stillness of distant lands. In your tent, it sat as a reminder of the man who had sharpened your mind. Not a weapon or shield, but a book serving as the foundation for your campaigns. Years later, the philosopher's teachings would echo faintly as you stood at the pinnacle of your power. His nephew, Callisthenes, traveled with you, chronicling your success until he refused to bow to your claim of godhood. You had him executed. By then, Aristotle's belief in reason had eroded under the weight of your divinity. For now, though, you are just a prince on the verge of greatness, with eyes blazing toward horizons others cannot fathom. Aristotle saw it clearly, the makings of an immortal ambition wrapped in mortal form. They underestimated you. When Philip fell, so many believed Macedonia would be next. A young, untested king inheriting a fragile kingdom filled with rivals and rebellions. They thought your crown would weigh you down, that it would slip from your hands. Easier still to believe this when Thebes, proud and defiant, raised its head. They were ancient, older than your father's ambitions, and they thought they were too vital, too respected to face your full wrath. They assumed Persia's whispers of rebellion would distract you, that your youth meant hesitation. They were wrong. When the rebellion began, you didn't wait for the world to decide how to judge you. You moved swiftly, dragging the fragmented pieces of Greece back under your banner by force. Thebes believed they had time. Time to prepare, time to form alliances, time to broaden their rebellion. Instead, you turned that belief to ash. In less than 2 weeks, you led your army south, covering over 300 miles. There were no warnings, no demands, no signals sent from the horizon. You came as suddenly as winter wind, and by the time Thebes realized what was happening, your forces had appeared before their gates. Still, they didn't surrender. They shouted rebellion to their last breath, claiming Persia would back them, claiming that other Greek city-states would rise alongside them. But Athens stayed silent, cautious. Sparta didn't join. Even the whispers of rebellion in the north grew quiet when your army arrived. Thebes was alone now, but drinking deeply from the dangerous cup of pride. You offered them a way out, lay down their weapons, submit, and live. That warning was their last. Once they refused, you didn't hesitate. Every layer of Theban resistance was destroyed with such precision that it left no time for hope to spread. Your soldiers didn't falter. They tore down walls, set fire to homes, and killed anyone who opposed them. You directed it all yourself, making choices that would echo well beyond this one battle. Temples were destroyed. Citizens fled into the streets to find themselves surrounded by soldiers who showed no mercy. Some were caught and slaughtered. Others were rounded up, carted away toward a fate even more cruel. 30,000 men, women, and children sold into slavery. Over 6,000 lay dead in the streets of the city they had once defended. When dawn came, only ruins remained. The city of Thebes, once a centerpiece of Greek pride, was erased. But there was one exception. You ordered your men to spare the house of the poet Pindar. It wasn't an act of mercy, it was a message. Greatness deserved recognition, even among the ashes. Everything else was expendable. It wasn't lost on anyone what had just happened. Greek fighting Greek, Macedonians killing fellow Hellenes. Some couldn't bear it, but to you, it was necessary. Unity had to come from absolute authority. Your lesson was clear. Defiance would not bring hope, it would bring annihilation. Cities that considered rebellion didn't need to test you anymore. The ruins of Thebes answered the question for them. After this, no city but Sparta resisted you. The rest surrendered without any further need for violence. Thebes had gambled and burned for it. They named you the Butcher as you rode through what was left of the city. The ash clung to your boots and perhaps to your memory of it. Yet when your men delivered the title, there was no flinch, no apology. You simply gave the warning that would travel farther than your enemies ever could. Disloyalty is death. The southern Greek states were yours. Persia was next. You didn't look back. The winds off the Aegean cut through the early morning haze as the ship rocks beneath your feet. You stand at the bow, eyes locked on the horizon where the water narrows into the strait known as the Hellespont. Behind you, Greece fades into the mist. In front of you lies Asia, Persian territory, forged by centuries of power, wealth, and sprawling empire. Yet, you do not hesitate. For you, this crossing is not just a journey, it is a moment thick with prophecy. You are bound east, not to invade, but to claim what you already see as yours. When the coastline emerges in the distance, your hand tightens around a spear. This is not a weapon now, but a symbol. Without ceremony, you throw it from your ship, watching it as it lands buried in the sand. It isn't simply a dramatic gesture, it's a declaration. You do not come to Asia as an outsider or a guest. That spear states a truth that has lived within you long before this moment. This land, this empire, this story belongs to you now. As the ship anchors and you step onto the soil of Asia, you pause. Your soldiers expect immediate orders, but you drop to one knee and pour wine into the waves behind you. The act is deliberate, reverent. The wine is an offering to Poseidon, the lord of these waters you've crossed, and to those who came before, the heroes immortalized in Homer's verses. Achilles, most of all. He wasn't just the hero of stories, he was your measure of greatness. Even here, amidst the hum of an army ready for conquest, you lower yourself further. At Troy, now only a ruin, you visit what is said to be Achilles' tomb. You speak, though your voice is quiet enough that only the dead may hear. You ask, or perhaps command, "Bless me, let me surpass you." The silence that follows feels heavy, as though the earth itself is unsure whether your ambition honors or defies its legends. Your army follows with discipline cultivated under years of your father's military tradition, yet something about them is now distinctly yours. They are over 30,000 strong, part Greeks, but also Thracians, mercenaries, engineers, scientists, and scribes. You have not just assembled fighters. You've gathered the tools to build something beyond war, an empire made permanent. As they disembark, their boots crunch against the sand that carries new weight. They are no longer on Macedonian or Greek soil. The bright gaze they cast toward you signals something new. Faith not in the gods, but in a young king who speaks as if he's already conquered. Persia, meanwhile, stirs faintly in the background of this moment. King Darius III, ruler of its vast territories, barely glances in your direction. His empire stretches across continents, with resources so plentiful his armies seem limitless. To him, you are a bold but insignificant boy. He doesn't yet realize what you soon will teach him. You aren't walking blindly into his lands for battle. You have studied this campaign before it even began. Greece was never the finish line. It was just the starting point. The liberation begins immediately. City by city, you march into Greek coastal settlements under Persian control. You do not raid, nor do you conquer as others might. Instead, you promise freedom from Persian rule, a freedom wrapped in the iron fist of your growing empire. Some city gates swing open without a fight. Others tremble, unsure whether to cheer or cower. Whichever path they choose, your army rolls forward with precision. At night, your tent is lit faintly by torches, and your voice carries softly through the camp. Homer's Iliad is read aloud while you polish your sword. The juxtaposition is striking, one hand gripping steel, the other clutching the poet's lines. This fusion of war and story defines you. Achilles stormed enemy shores to carve his story into legend, and now here you are, sharpening not just blades, but your own mythos. Your step into Asia is reckless by the standards of kingdoms. Less than 50,000 soldiers cross the Hellespont with you to face an empire that can command hundreds of thousands. But these are not the fearful numbers of small kings. They are the forces of a figure who moves faster than the walls of empires can close. Your name spreads ahead of you like wildfire, carried by speed, by absolute discipline, and by the weight of what you have already done. As the day fades, the Hellespont dissolves into the horizon behind your camp. To your men, there is no returning home, but not because the way back is lost. Your words echo through the campfire-lit night, spoken in sharp resolve. We will not return home until we have conquered Persia. There are no gasps, no questions, only the assurance of your power. Forward is the only direction now. The river moves swiftly, its cold, churning water glinting under the sun. This is the Granicus, and across it, your enemy awaits. Persian nobles, their armor polished to perfection, sit on powerful, restless horses. Their banners ripple behind them, the gold and silver embroidery catching the light. Alongside them stand foreign mercenaries, brought into service by Persian wealth. They wait at their ease, watching you on the opposite bank. You know what they're thinking. They expect hesitation. They expect caution. They expect you to act like most kings, deliberate, careful, calculating. They don't know you. The Granicus is not just a physical obstacle. It's a challenge, one your generals approach with hesitation. Parmenion, experienced and measured, urges you to wait for morning. He speaks cautiously, suggesting that crossing now against such odds is folly. But you listen without hearing. You've already made your choice. To sit back, even for one night, would allow the Persians to rest, to build confidence. They would feel safe on their high ground, on their carefully chosen defensive position. You cannot allow that. For you, hesitation is the same as surrender. Weakness must always belong to the other side. And so, with the sun still high, you do what they least expect. You order the advance. Without fanfare, without hesitation, you lead the charge straight into the icy, rushing river. The water crashes against your body as your horse fights the current, You look behind, not out of doubt, but to see your men follow. They do. The Phalangides weigh in, shields raised against the arrows slicing through the air. The cavalry plunges after you, their powerful steeds kicking up sprays of icy water. It's chaotic, dangerous. To the Persians, who line the opposite bank, it should have looked like madness. A boy king drenched to his waist, leading his entire army into the depths of a river. But you know better. They are thrown off by your speed, confused by your recklessness. It's exactly what you intended. You emerge from the river, soaked but unshaken, and roar the command to attack. The Persians charge to meet you, horses pounding the dirt, lances lowered. Chaos erupts on the field. The clang of metal strikes your ears, and your first kill comes quickly. A sword through the throat of a noble who thought he might be the one to stop you. There's no time to pause. Another enemy falls, and then another. The sight of your white-plumed helmet cutting its own path of fear through the battlefield. Blood splatters, streaking your arms and face. The Persians press hard, surrounding you. They know who you are. They recognize the armor that marks you as their prize. You fight without pause, even as one Persian noble raises his axe, the blade poised to split your skull. But then, at that exact moment, Clitus the Black thunders in, cutting the man down before the strike can land. You don't stop to thank him. You keep fighting, because the battle isn't over. By sunset, the ground is littered with Persian bodies, the rest of their forces in full retreat. Their satraps lie dead, their confidence shattered. You stand on the far bank, breathing heavily, blood dripping from your armor, but none of it is yours. This is your first true test. Here, you have shown not only your men, but the entire empire of Persia what kind of king you are. Later, as you walk the battlefield among the dying and dead, you pass 2,000 Greek mercenaries who fought for Persia. These aren't faceless enemies. They are fellow Greeks who chose gold over loyalty. That betrayal earns them the harshest punishment. Not exile, but death. Persia's tools are destroyed wholesale. From the battle's spoils, you take 300 Persian suits of armor and send them to Athens as a gift for Athena. But that gift isn't just tribute, it's a message. Beneath it, a simple note. Alexander, son of Philip, and the Greeks, except the Spartans, from the barbarians of Asia. This, your first victory, is not a victory of war. It's a beginning of the myth. The battles will only get bigger from here. The rain doesn't relent. Roads collapse into muddy streams as your army struggles south, the weight of exhaustion palpable in every step. Men mutter to each other about the weather, the food, their blistered feet. But you're already thinking ahead, eyes fixed on the invisible enemy somewhere in the distance. Your scouts tell you Darius is far behind, chasing you with an army that shatters any scale you can imagine. You expect to find him later, weeks away, after your forces have time to regroup. That expectation dies quickly. Word reaches you. The great king is not behind, he's ahead. You don't hesitate, you pivot. Where another commander might waver, you act. You turn your entire army north, forcing them to march back toward the very threat they were hoping to escape. This is no leisurely maneuver. You push at an impossible pace, racing through the narrow, treacherous terrain near Issus. Here, the coast lines one side while jagged mountains press from the other. Your soldiers grip tight to their weapons, their breath fogging the cool air, nerves trembling under the storm clouds of what's to come. But you smile. You can see the battlefield forming in your mind. Persia's greatest strength, its overwhelming numbers, means nothing in this narrow choke point. And then you see them. Darius's army sprawls across the plain ahead of you, its sheer scale almost mocking. More than 100,000 soldiers stretch into the distance like an endless wave. Infantry, archers, elite cavalry, the immortals, their silver-scaled armor glinting even through the dim light. You even spot war elephants lumbering beneath the banners of empire. At the center of it all is Darius himself, standing tall in his golden chariot, framed by the richest spectacle power can provide. The mere sight of it almost swallows the air from the field. It would overwhelm a lesser general, but for you, this is the moment you've been sharpening yourself for. Your officers falter. They exchange uncertain glances under the weight of what they see. Even among your ranks, there's no hiding the toll of weeks of hard marching. Supplies are low, stamina weaker, but you don't allow hesitation to creep in. You burn with purpose. This is not just another battle, it's a stage. The lines of history are waiting, and you'll write them with blade and blood. When the clash finally comes, you lead where you always do, at the front. Mounted on Bucephalus with your companion cavalry by your side, you drive hard for the Persian left flank. Their cavalry folds under your weight as you smash through them with speed, precision, and the sheer will of men who have followed you into what should be the impossible. The chaos spills like ink, spreading through the Persian line, faster than their commanders can recover. But you're already moving, pressing toward the center where Darius looms. Through the crush of soldiers, you lock eyes with the king himself. In that moment, it's no longer armies clashing, but one man against another in some unspoken primal calculation. And then, before any decision can crystallize, Darius moves. He turns back, his golden chariot jerking into retreat. The man who embodied the weight of the Persian Empire is now fleeing through mud while his soldiers are trampled beneath the chaos of their own ranks. The field tears apart around you. Cries echo, Persian commands in confusion. Men screaming for help, foreign mercenaries unsure whether to stand or run. You press forward, unstoppable, as though you're moving through history itself, carving your place with every stroke of the sword. By the end of it, the field is yours. The victory doesn't end with bloodshed. After the battle, among the spoils of chaos, you find Darius's family, his wife, daughters, and mother. They're taken unharmed, and you treat them not as prisoners, but as royalty. You call the queen mother, a gesture that echoes purposefully across the world. To others, it's a display of mercy, a hint of noble generosity. But you know the deeper meaning. The great king's family is now yours to command. His legacy, his symbols, his scepter, bow, and royal cloak, abandoned in his retreat, are now in your hands. This isn't just a victory, it's a statement. By nightfall, the gods are honored, the wounded tended, and the dead buried. In the eyes of your men, and soon the world, this is no ordinary king's triumph. You've claimed the right not just to the battlefield, but to the empire itself. A king of kings rising from the remnants of an empire brought to its knees at Issus. The guards bring them to your tent, Darius's mother, his wife, and his daughters. They were veiled and silent, moving with the hesitant of those who know their lives are no longer their own. They likely expect the worst: enslavement, cruelty, violation. After all, they've been told stories about Macedonians, barbarians of the West, ruthless and uncivilized. Huddled together, heads bowed, they don't yet realize their captor is not the man they imagined. You see them tremble, but you do not raise your voice. Instead, you step forward and lift the Queen Mother off her knees as she throws herself down in desperation. Her hands grip yours as she begs for their lives, as if her voice is the only shield in a world that has shattered around her. But you speak calmly and in Persian. You are not prisoners, you tell her. You are royalty, and I am not your enemy. The words are simple, but they land with the weight of something far larger. To them, you are not a conqueror. For the first time since their capture, a flicker of stability is handed back to them. Their fear begins to dissolve, replaced by a cautious disbelief. You do not humiliate them. The Queen Mother's servants, who had been scattered by your men, are returned unharmed. Luxuries are restored to them. They are given respect, comfort, even dignity in a turbulent world where defeat usually strips everything away. A moment with you, and they realize their enemy is not here to destroy them. No, you are here to subvert their expectations completely. Almost overnight, your actions spread through Persian lands. Rumors ignite like dry grass as word travels from city to city, court to court. Alexander honored the Persian queens. He didn't parade them as slaves or humiliate them before an army. Instead, he treated them like living symbols of a proud empire, not as spoils of war, but as a bridge to legitimacy. He held their dignity intact while showing the empire that even Persian royalty could be absorbed into his world. What began in your tent ripples outward, casting you not as a barbarian, but as a leader governed by his own form of nobility. Even so, you notice something else in this carefully choreographed moment. Among the queens, there is one figure who draws your attention: Statira, Darius's eldest daughter. She is silent and regal, her head held high despite her captivity. Her strength reminds you of someone else, your mother Olympias. There's pride in her, a certain quiet defiance that separates her from the others. You don't speak to her often, perhaps no more than polite words exchanged lightly, but her image lingers, a reflection of a different kind of power. When you consolidate this win through gestures of mercy, Darius stirs the diplomatic waters in desperation. He sends you a letter, begging, bargaining. He offers you lands, gold, even his daughter in marriage. Anything to smooth over what Issus has turned into, an irreversible shift in his empire's balance. But you rip the letter, and your reply comes sharp and direct. I already have this land, you say. I already have his family, and if he wants to see them again, he can come and kneel. You do not paint this as arrogance. To those who hear it, it sounds like certainty. A king carving his rightful path through a world that resists change. When they mistook Hephaestion, your dearest companion, for you, you laughed. He too is Alexander, you told them. Though it seemed like a light-hearted remark, it revealed an unshakable bond. Hephaestion was more than a friend. He was your parallel, your mirror. A man you trusted as you trusted yourself. Darius never saw his family again. You cared for them longer than he did. Historians would one day note how the loyalty they gave you may have outweighed anything the great king earned from them. Piece by piece, you remolded the empire, not with swords alone, but with image, dignity, and control. You weren't just fighting for land, you were reshaping perception itself. At night, your camp feels like the world distilled into a moment. Macedonian soldiers sharpen their blades. Persian royalty sits under sheltered tents. Scribes and priests whisper over firelight. You wander through it all, silent, knowing no empire can resist a ruler who conquers both with power and with care. Tyre was a city that thought itself untouchable. Perched on an island just a half-mile from the mainland, with towering walls and a navy that patrolled the seas like a moving fortress, they had survived sieges for centuries. When you arrived, fresh from victory after victory, they didn't bow. They refused to let you enter their temple, the Temple of Heracles, a god you claimed as your own. The Tyrians told you no, and that word, for them, sealed their fate. You studied their defenses carefully. The island was separated from the mainland by deep water, its walls rising high enough to laugh off any ranged attack. To supplement their strength, Tyre's fleet dominated the waters, harassing anything that approached. Most generals faced with that kind of obstacle would have moved on. There were other cities, other targets, but for you, Tyre wasn't just one more city. It was a message, a point to prove. You weren't just marching through the Persian Empire. You were reshaping it in your image, and no one and no island had the right to stand apart. So you made a decision. If the sea separated Tyre from you, you would erase the sea. You ordered your men to build a causeway, stretching from the mainland straight through the waves. Stone by stone, the waters were filled. Men worked tirelessly, hauling massive blocks, stacking earth and rubble. But the Tyrians did not sit idle. They sent their ships to burn what you built, battering it from the water. The first effort was wiped away. The project could have ended there, but you didn't stop. You rebuilt the causeway. Stronger, taller, fortified with towers to defend it from attacks. Every setback made the structure thicker, heavier, and harder to destroy. You kept pushing through 7 months of grueling labor. The causeway crept closer to the island, the sea slowly giving way under the stubborn weight of human effort. It wasn't just Tyre that resisted. Water, wind, and fire joined the fight. The sea itself seemed to defy you. Your men suffered. Exhaustion and fear set in as ships launched fire at the structure, as Tyre's defenders rained down arrows from above, but your will outlasted the waves. When the causeway finally reached Tyre, there was no mercy. A fleet of ships, including vessels you had captured and repurposed from other cities, joined the assault. Your men stormed the walls, furious over the long months of struggle. The Tyrians fought fiercely, but they couldn't hold. When the outer defenses crumbled, the bloodshed began. Your army poured in, cutting down anyone who resisted. 8,000 Tyrians died in the attack. Another 2,000 were captured and crucified along the shoreline. The bodies hung as warnings to the world. Not even the sea could protect you from Alexander. And yet, in the midst of this brutality, there was purpose. Once the city was under your control, you marched calmly into the Temple of Heracles. Silently, you lit your offering to the god, the smoke curling upward through the broken city. Standing there, you said aloud, "The gods will remember who came here." For you, this wasn't just a siege, it was a statement shouted across the empire. Tyre had dared to deny you, and now it would stand forever as proof of what defiance would cost. Fun fact, that causeway, built out of fire and fury, remains to this day. Tyre is no longer an island, it is a peninsula, the land you created still connecting it to the mainland. Mind-blowing fact, you spent more time breaking Tyre, 7 months, than you did in defeating the Persian king at Issus. Tyre's mistake was simple. They said no, and you were not a man of compromises. The sands of the Egyptian desert stretch endlessly, blinding under the unforgiving sun. The air shimmers with heat, and every breath carries the weight of dust. Men stumble as they march, some collapsing in exhaustion, others muttering curses at a journey that seems endless. Your army has known battles, sieges, and storms, but there is something different about this. They look to you for answers, but you offer none. This isn't their journey. It's yours. You march not for war, not for land, not even for glory. You march for truth. Far from the cities and fertile lands of the Nile lies the destination, a place shrouded in whispers, half myth and half reality. The Siwah Oasis, a temple of the god Ammon, whom the Greeks know as Zeus Ammon, sits in its center, guarded by priests who claim to hear the divine. To those who follow, it feels like madness, leading an army into the desert, battling not soldiers, but the elements themselves. But you press on, your will driving them forward. To you, this journey is not a detour. It is the path. When you finally reach Siwah, the oasis blooms from the sands like an offering. The priests stand waiting as though forewarned of your arrival. They do not ask your name. One of them steps forward, his voice calm, yet weighted with significance, and calls you the son of Zeus. The words linger in the air, heavy and deliberate. You do not correct him. On some level, you've always felt this. Olympias, your mother, had whispered of your divine parentage since you were a boy, but hearing it here, from strangers in a place untouched by the world you know, feels different. It feels like confirmation. Inside the temple, the air is cooler, still. Stone walls rise around you, ancient and solid, sheltering secrets spoken only to gods. Here, for the first time in months, perhaps years, you are alone. No army waits for orders, no generals plan campaigns. The priests lead you to the inner sanctum, but they do not follow. Whatever happens inside is between you and the divine. You step past the threshold into the unknown. What you ask, no one else will ever hear. What you learn, no one else will understand. Outside, the desert awaits. Inside, silence gives way to something unspoken, something that feels less like sound and more like weight pressing against your chest. You emerge sometime later, though the exact length of time is lost even to you. And yet, everything feels different. When you step back into the sun, your men notice it immediately. Your eyes are no longer those of a king. They belong to something else now, something vast. You never reveal the question you asked, or the answer you received. It remains yours, locked away as a riddle the world will never solve. But what happened in that inner chamber marks a turning point. The priests, who so often speak in riddles, are direct with you, a rarity that unsettles even them. It is said that oracles usually speak in ways designed to confuse, leaving interpretation in the hands of men. For you, there is no ambiguity. The clarity of the exchange leaves its mark not just on you, but on those who witnessed your arrival. From this moment onward, you cease claiming to be just a king. You carry yourself differently. When you return to your army and the long march back through the sands begins, the heat bites at your skin. The dry wind digs into your lungs, but one thought burns brighter than the sun. I was born of prophecy. Now I carry it. There's no hesitation in your stride. For the first time, the horizon looks not distant, but reachable. Egypt greets you as differently as any land ever has. Here, the streets don't bristle with barricades, the people aren't brandishing spears, and no armies meet you at the borders. Instead, they cheer, calling you Soter, their savior. For over 2 centuries, they have endured Persian rule, watching foreign kings sit on their ancient thrones, desecrating what they held sacred. But your arrival changes everything. You're not merely an outsider. Here, you're their liberator. The Egyptians see you as chosen, someone sent by the gods to free them from the shadow of oppression. And so, without even a single battle, you step into the heart of their civilization as something far more than victorious. The priests usher you into the sacred halls where the symbols of eternal kingship await. They bring forth the royal insignia, the crook and the flail, symbols of dominion over both the people and the land. The rituals they perform are more than ceremony, they transform you. By their hands, you are crowned Pharaoh, ruler of the 2 lands, guardian of Upper and Lower Egypt. But it's not just a title they place upon you, it's a divine mandate. Pharaohs, after all, aren't mortals. They are the intermediaries between men and gods. They're living embodiment on earth. And now, they say, so are you. This isn't the Macedonian throne you grew up under. It's something greater, heavier with responsibility, yet intoxicating with potential. You don't hesitate to seize it because, in this moment, you see something few conquerors ever would. This kingdom, ancient, enduring, bound to the cycles of the Nile, could outlast its rulers. But not you. You will make yourself eternal. Almost immediately, your mind turns to legacy. You look northward, where the Nile spreads into the delta and meets the sea, and envision not just another city, but a cornerstone for the ages. You found Alexandria, a name that will echo across centuries. You carve its foundations near an old village called Rakotis, ensuring no detail escapes your vision. The streets will run in a grid. The lighthouse will rise like a beacon, and it will hold the greatest library mankind has ever seen. For now, it's only a beginning, but you already anticipate how long its shadow will stretch. The Egyptian priests, captivated by your embrace of their traditions, inscribe your name into cartouches, oval carvings reserved for gods and royalty. They offer prayers, and your name is muttered as part of their hymns. In their eyes, you have already crossed the boundary between man and divine. Yet this moment is not entirely built on ritual, it is also strategy. By taking their customs as your own, you transform potential resistance into reverence. They fight with you now, not against you. And there's truth to what they've started to proclaim about you. You have come further in a few years than most rulers do in a lifetime. You are king of Macedon, conqueror of Persia, and now Pharaoh of Egypt. 3 vast realms, 3 distinct peoples, all unified under your name. The world begins to whisper more than awe. It whispers divinity. Some say Zeus himself must be your father. Others simply look at you and see a leader who no longer seems bound by mortal limits. The sun dips below the pyramids in the west as you stand in your new capital. The ancient structures rear up behind you, reminders of what Egypt's kings created long ago, immortality in stone. Nearby, the Nile churns with the promise of life and continuity. Standing there, you feel it wash over you fully for the first time. You aren't simply governing a land. You are weaving yourself into the myths that hold power to outlive even pyramids. This is no longer about being a king. It's about becoming a legend. The battlefield seems endless under the pale light of the moon, its expanse unnervingly perfect. Darius has ensured that. For weeks now, his army has flattened the land, removing every obstacle, every hill and trench, so his war chariots and sheer weight of numbers can crush anything in their path. His confidence is as immense as the forces he's gathered. In front of you stands over 200,000 Persian soldiers. They bring elephants, their tusks painted and armored, towering over the infantry. The famed immortals, their best warriors, gleam in precision. Every corner of Darius's empire, men who speak languages you don't even know, has contributed to this vast tide, a vivid contrast to your smaller force. Less than 50,000 men of Macedonians and allies stand against this behemoth. But each one looks at you and only waits for your next command. Your generals sit with you under the stars, tracing lines in the dirt with nervous hands. Parmenion, your most seasoned advisor, argues fiercely for caution. He urges a night retreat to find ground that won't cater to the Persians' chariots. Others mumble their agreement. They point toward the horizon, where the sheer length of the Persian front dwarfs anything that Greece has ever faced. But you shake your head. You listen to the concerns, absorb them, then shut them all down with a single word: attack. Hesitation isn't an option. You know that waiting can only weaken resolve, erode morale. To win, you must strike first. When you give the order, there's no going back. Dawn comes slowly. The first rays of light reveal dust clouds already forming as the Persian army shifts and marches into position. The sound grows, distant at first, like thunder rolling across empty fields. Their sheer size becomes clearer by the second, an unbroken line stretching toward the horizon. But you don't falter. With a quick wave, you mount your horse, clad as always in glinting armor and with your iconic white-plumed helmet. You're not hiding. You want them to see you. You ride toward the right flank, taking personal command of the companion cavalry. This is where the battle will be won. Your forces move deliberately, baiting the Persian left to extend too far, pulling their center apart. Then you strike. The companion cavalry surges forward, a hammer smashing into the opening your plan has created. The Persian ranks reel under the pressure, and through the chaos, one figure becomes unmistakable: Darius, standing high in his golden chariot. He is their anchor, their symbol of stability, and you know that if he falls, or even flees, the rest will crumble just as they did at Issus. You don't hesitate. You press forward, your cavalry forming the tip of an arrow aimed directly for him. Eyes locked on Darius, you see the moment fear overtakes him. He hesitates for just a second longer than he should. Then he turns. His chariot spins, wheels tearing up the ground as he retreats into the safety of the rear. His army sees it too, and that's when they break. The discipline of his vast force dissolves in moments. Soldiers scream, trample one another in the panic to escape. The battlefield becomes a sea of chaos and blood. By nightfall, the Persian army has vanished. Darius's royal equipment, his bow, shield, and scepter, lie abandoned in the dirt once more, symbols of a king unworthy of his empire. Your men cheer, lifting their weapons and calling your name into the dark. For them, this is the climax, the moment they have been waiting for. You hold the silence just a little longer before speaking. Your voice is calm, almost quiet, but the words carry all the weight of the victory they've just seen. Asia is mine. Darius is gone, and the battlefield at Gaugamela lies silent. His army is shattered, his empire in fragments, but Persia is far from yours. Conquering its land doesn't mean owning its heart. The Persians have ruled the known world for 2 centuries under the title of Shahanshah, King of Kings, and their loyalty is tied not to borders, but to traditions, power, and ritual. To truly claim their empire, you must become more than Macedon's king. You must become theirs. When you enter Babylon, the city erupts, not in fear, but celebration. The streets overflow with people, chanting and scattering flowers before you. Persian priests meet you at the gates, dressed in robes older than your country. They call you Shahanshah, and you accept the title with purpose. But this role demands more than words. The Persian court is watching, judging, weighing whether you are truly fit to sit on the centuries-old throne of the Achaemenids. And so, you begin to change. Not who you are, but the way you rule. In the Persian palace, you allow their customs to surround you. You wear their diadem, silk robes, and bejeweled belts. You sit on Darius's throne as their king of kings. It's not an easy transition, nor a popular one. To some of your Macedonian men, this is treason. They grumble about abandoning the simplicity of their homeland for the opulence of the East. Stares linger too long, whispers grow louder. You hear their discontent, but you don't address it. Not yet. You know resistance to change is natural, but power comes from mastering that resistance, not yielding to it. You do more than wear their crown. You immerse yourself in Persia's culture. You anoint Persian officers as governors. You take their daughters as wives, adopting their families to your legacy. At the temples, you honor their ancient deities, not with half-hearted gestures, but as though they have always been your own. This is not about erasing Persia from the map. It's about weaving it into your story. You're not just conquering their empire, you're transforming it, and in turn, letting it transform you. Even the way you stand before men reflects this shift. You begin practicing proskynesis, the Persian tradition of bowing before royalty. You ask your men to bow before you too, not to humiliate them, but to show the world that you stand above kings. Most refuse. Even Callisthenes, Aristotle's nephew and your trusted historian, speaks out against it in public. His rebellion is not ignored. You execute him for insubordination, sending a clear message. This is no longer a Greek army. It is Alexander's alone. Your decisions aren't reckless. They are precise. The silks, the titles, the bows, the alliances, all serve one purpose: unification. You understand that to keep a fractured empire together, you can't rule as a foreign conqueror. You must become the center of every world you've touched: Macedon, Persia, Egypt. This is your design. This is your bridge between them. As you hold the Persian crown in your hand for the first time, its weight settles over you, not as a burden, but as a realization. Persia, in all its vastness, isn't defeated until its people no longer see Darius when they close their eyes. They must see you. You lift the crown onto your head, feeling the culmination of years of conquest sharpen into this moment. The throne of Macedon was your inheritance, but this you have won with your own blood. And as the Persian court watches in solemn awe, one thought burns in your mind: my father conquered Greece. I have conquered kings. Now, I will conquer identity itself. Parmenion had been with you since the beginning. He was your father's most trusted general, the man who stood beside Philip through years of war, and later beside you. At Granicus, it was Parmenion who helped guide your forces across that treacherous river. At Issus, his strategic mind bolstered your plans to shatter a vastly larger Persian army. Time after time, his voice had steadied you, his experience had reinforced your instincts. But something had shifted. For all his brilliance, Parmenion's age was showing. His caution had grown louder, his hesitation more frequent. What once came across as wisdom now felt like resistance. That rift widened with his son, Philotas. Word reached you of whispers in the dark, allegations that Philotas had taken part in a conspiracy against you. For days you interrogated him, demanding names, proof, anything to confirm the treachery. In the end, it didn't matter whether he fully confessed or not. All that mattered was the seed of doubt planted in your mind. If there was even the slightest chance that he had betrayed you, you couldn't afford to take the risk. The axe fell, and Philotas was executed without hesitation. But as the deed was done, a darker realization settled over you. Philotas wasn't the only problem. You remember the way Parmenion looked at his son, the way he spoke of him in unguarded moments. Parmenion wouldn't forgive you for this. Loyalty, no matter how deep, does not erase grief. How could a man who had fought beside you, who had shaped your victories since the start, serve you fully now that you'd condemned his son to death? You didn't wait for an answer. You sent riders to Ecbatana, where Parmenion was stationed, commanding supply lines and holding the empire's treasury. When they reached his tent, the orders were clear. No trial, no warnings. They killed the old general where he stood. The decision was brutal, but it wasn't impulsive. Parmenion held too many pieces of your empire in his hands. The wealth that sustained your army, the routes that kept your forces supplied as you pressed deeper into the east. He was the kind of man who could overthrow an empire, not with ambition, but with a simple refusal to obey. You couldn't allow even a hint of rebellion to take root. In choosing Parmenion's death, you chose stability, control, and the future of your conquests. Friendship, trust, years of shared victories, all of it was secondary. In many ways, this moment broke something essential. Parmenion had been more than a general to you. He'd been one of the few men who could speak to you as an equal. He questioned you when others dared not. Now, his voice was silent, and those around you learned quickly what that meant. No one around you would dare challenge a decision again. No one would tell you no. You had killed not just a man, but the last fragment of accountability within your ranks. That night, you sat alone. The camp was quiet, your men unaware of the order you had given hours earlier. The weight of what you'd done didn't sink in the way it might have for others. You didn't feel guilt or grief or regret. What you did feel surprised you with its clarity. A simple thought burned in your mind, steady and unshaken. If I can kill Parmenion, I can kill anyone. He was the one who never needed to bow. Even before the armies, the empire, and the crown, Hephaestion had always stood beside you, not beneath you. It wasn't about loyalty. He didn't follow you because you commanded it. He followed you because he believed in you, the way you had always believed in him. From the first time you met as boys, he wasn't just a companion. He was something deeper, inseparable from who you had become. You grew up together in Pella, wrestling in the training grounds, dreaming of glory at the feet of the same tutors. As the son of a noble Macedonian family, Hephaestion was your equal, not in rank, but in every way that mattered. When the others studied for war, Hephaestion was different. He listened when you carried on about philosophy, about Achilles and Patroclus, about the idea of friendship so pure it transcended everything, time, family, even death. Hephaestion didn't just listen, he understood, and when war began to carve its path through your life, when glory began to overshadow simpler things, his presence stayed the same. On campaign, he was your shadow. While others trembled in your silence or bathed in your power, he cut through both as if they didn't exist. When you raged, Hephaestion stayed silent until your clarity returned. When you doubted yourself, he reminded you that no one else saw weakness in you. Not generals, not soldiers, not the gods, only him. And when the world bent down to kiss your feet, he had the audacity to stay standing. You gave him everything you could, command over half the empire, the title of Chiliarch, second only to you in authority. He carried your letters into Persia himself when you sought peace, led key units into critical battles, and returned political insults with his unshakable calm while those close to you mocked him behind your back. They didn't understand why this slender, quiet soldier rose higher than men older, stronger, or more experienced. You never explained yourself. When they doubted him, you silenced them with promotions. When the Persian queen mother mistook him for you didn't take it as an insult. You laughed and told her he too is Alexander. You meant it. In the way that Achilles had his Patroclus, you had your Hephaestion. But nothing, not titles or swords or brilliance, could shield him from what came. One day, during the long march back from your conquests, Hephaestion fell ill. At first, it seemed like a minor fever. You'd seen him push through worse. He was young, commanding, alive. Death felt irrelevant, something that happened to other people or in other places, not to him. You convinced yourself of this until the moment came that you couldn't deny it anymore. Strong as he was, the sickness didn't care. Hephaestion was gone. You could feel it in your chest, a weight so vast that for once, no armor could hide it. You held his body, trying to find the man who had once teased you about your ambition, who had never hesitated to call you foolish, who had seen Alexander, not the conqueror, but the boy beneath. And now, he was gone. Violent grief tore through you. You screamed. You cut your hair, a gesture of deep mourning few kings would dare display. You declared public mourning across the empire. No one was exempt. You had his doctor executed, blaming him, though it solved nothing. You no longer cared about justice or fairness. In those moments, nothing mattered but the void he left in his absence. As his funeral pyre burned, a piece of you burned with it. You stood there, watching the flames consume the man who held so much of who you were and whispered words no one else could hear. You were the best part of me. The mountains of Bactria rise like jagged walls against the sky, their cliffs fractured and unyielding. For months, you've pursued an enemy unlike any other you've faced. They don't meet you on the open field. There are no great battles, no formations to exploit. The Bactrians vanish before you can strike, slipping into narrow passes and high valleys. Their fortresses cling to the peaks, daring you to follow where no army should. You burn villages, cut off supply lines, but it's as though you are chasing shadows. These aren't soldiers in the traditional sense. They're survivors, and they fight like ghosts. Then comes the Sogdian Rock, unlike anything you've seen. A fortress rises on sheer cliffs, its walls blending into the mountain itself. Messengers from the defenders bring a laughable proposal. Surrender is impossible, they say. Even Zeus's army couldn't scale those cliffs. Their confidence, bold as it is, seals their fate. You take one look at the stronghold and grin. In the dead of night, you send your finest climbers, men trained to crawl, claw, and scale where others would fall. Armed with iron spikes and pure will, they begin the impossible ascent up the vertical rock face. Before dawn, shouts echo from above. Your banners now flutter where their laughter once did. Word spreads quickly through the garrison. Zeus may not have climbed the cliffs, but Alexander's men have. The fortress surrenders, its defenders shell-shocked that the unthinkable has become real. Inside, the usual spoils of war await: gold, weapons, frightened nobles. But among them, one figure catches your eye: Roxana. Young, sharp-voiced, and fiercely proud, she stands apart, her expressions more defiance than fear. She's no ordinary captive. A daughter of a Bactrian noble, she carries herself like someone raised to wear crowns instead of chains. In that instant, your interest isn't just personal. She represents something far greater than mere beauty. Through her, you don't just conquer Bactria, you claim it. This marriage will tie her people to you in a way no blade or siege engine ever could. The ceremony is Persian, filled with rituals unfamiliar to your Macedonian generals watching in solemn silence. They do not cheer or question you openly, but their unease is clear. For them, this marriage feels like yet another shift, a blend of two worlds that, to many of them, should remain separate. You share bread with Roxana, her hand tied to yours with ceremonial cloth. There's no turning back now. Alexander the Conqueror, the commander of armies, has just bound himself to the proud mountain tribes in a way that swords never could. Something shifts in the eyes of your enemies as well. They see the ceremony not as union, but domination, an alliance of practicality cloaked in tradition. To them, it's clear. This is no longer just a war of armies. You are building a claim not just on their land, but on their future. Roxana means little star in the ancient tongue, a name echoing something delicate yet unshakable. She will be the only woman you ever marry, a fact that historians will remember long after your campaign's end. But standing there, looking into her eyes for the briefest moment, you feel the question hanging in the air. Perhaps your generals wonder it too. Is this love, or merely an intricate piece in a much larger strategy? Likely, it's both. You don't linger on the thought. Instead, you read the room. Your advisors, your troops, her family, all watching, waiting for any sign. You lift her veil, and beneath the silence, you know this action sends a message even your greatest victories couldn't. You act as both king and strategist, letting the weight of the moment anchor your words unspoken. I am not here to destroy your world. I am here to become its future. They told you the edge of the world lay at Persia's borders, a finite line where victory could sit unchallenged. But that was never true for you. Where others saw an end, you saw an opening. Beyond the Hindu Kush, unknown lands stretched into the distance. What waited there wasn't just another kingdom, but something fundamentally different. A world where your name meant nothing. And so, you kept going. Crossing the mountains came first, a brutal journey that tested the loyalty and endurance of your army. The peaks scraped the sky, so frigid that some men claimed even the gods wouldn't venture there. But the mountains gave way to new challenges, far harsher than the cold: India. You entered a world of dense forests, rivers too broad to imagine, and rains that poured ceaselessly from the skies. Monsoons lashed at your men, while the thick, humid heat weighed on them like armor they couldn't remove. Your weapons rusted, simple tools began to fail in the damp. The jungle became its own kind of enemy. Strange animals prowled the edges of your camp at night. Poisonous snakes, silent and hidden, struck men while they slept, sowing fear more destructive than battle. For the first time, your soldiers began to murmur openly. They had marched for years, following you further than any had dreamed possible, but now they looked at the endless rain and the walls of green and wondered if the gods had cursed them. How much farther could they go? How much more could they give? They whispered about turning back, about Macedonia, about the comforts they would never feel again. But you didn't waver. You stood before them as more than a general. You were still the boy who had looked at Achilles and believed in something beyond mortal limitations. The murmur of your men could not compete with the fire that burned within you. Battle came in unexpected forms as well. Here, kings ruled who had never heard your name. Their armies challenged you with war elephants, creatures larger and more terrifying than anything your men had faced before. But you refused to be stopped. Through the steamy jungles and across rivers that took days to ford, you faced one king after another. Some fell quickly, some hesitated before bending the knee, but your momentum didn't slow. This wasn't about conquest anymore. This was something elemental. The idea that the world had an edge was a story told by men whose imagination was as limited as their reach. Every battle here proved how false that was. Before one fight, Indian philosophers, ascetics who wandered the land clothed in little more than the sun's heat, approached you. Their words were as stripped down as their lives. One of them asked you, "Why conquer the world when death conquers you?" You laughed at the simplicity of it, dismissing the idea outwardly, but their challenge lingered in your mind. The question didn't undermine you, it sharpened you. The philosophers might preach limits, but you weren't interested in finding them. You had no maps for these lands, no guides who could chart the rivers winding toward the horizon. Every decision to press forward was a gamble, each new mile uncharted territory in both the literal and the symbolic sense. But the risks meant nothing compared to the alternative, because turning back would be an act of surrender to a boundary you refused to accept. For you, there was no choice. You looked at the dense jungle before you, wreathed in mist and uncertainty, and whispered the words that made the rain feel quiet by comparison. If this is the edge of the world, I'll burn a road through it. The Hydaspes River churns under an unrelenting monsoon. Its waters swell and surge, a natural barrier that would make most generals reconsider their plans. On the opposite bank, King Porus waits. He looms above his troops from the height of his war elephant, which stands massive and steady despite the storm. Behind him, a restless wall of over 200 more elephants rises from among his infantry, their tusks gleaming and their trunks swinging like battering rams. Your men have never seen anything like this. These beasts are living fortresses, powerful, terrifying, and utterly foreign to your battle-hardened army. Whispers run through the ranks. Fear traces its way through even the bravest soldiers. But you don't hesitate. The river is swollen and wild. But it's also an opportunity. Nobody expects you to cross it tonight. Not in this darkness, not under this storm. That is exactly why you move under the cover of night, leading your forces to a crossing point downstream. The rain pours, and the current fights every step, but your men follow you without breaking. By dawn, dripping and exhausted, your army stands on the far bank, flanking Porus before his army even realizes what's happened. The battle begins like a storm. The elephants charge, their sheer momentum breaking through the ranks as horses panic and rear. These creatures are more than tools of war. They are chaos unleashed on the battlefield. Your cavalry struggles to navigate the maelstrom of flailing trunks and enormous bodies. Soldiers scream as men are trampled underfoot. Horses scatter or collapse, unable to stand against this raw power. Yet, in the middle of the chaos, you remain focused. You cut through the battlefield, rallying your units, commanding them to adapt. Your archers aim for the elephants' drivers, and when they fall, the great animals lose their coordination, turning their weight against their own ranks. Slowly, you push through, countering strategy with adaptability. You see your chance and charge without hesitation, cutting deep into Porus's formation like a blade. Porus himself fights like no other ruler you've faced. Wounded but unrelenting, he stays atop his elephant, directing his troops with remarkable precision. Even as the tide of battle turns against him, he refuses to retreat. He doesn't flee like Darius or abandon his men. He stands tall, proud, defiant. When the fighting ends, his capture is inevitable, yet there's no humiliation in his surrender. You meet him face to face, intrigued by this man who has resisted you with such ferocity and honor. When you ask him how he wishes to be treated, his answer is simple: like a king. The words hang in the air, bold and unshaken. You smile and reply, "You shall have it." True to your word, you not only restore Porus to his throne, but expand his kingdom, ensuring that your conquest is not marked by destruction, but by respect. This victory is as much about diplomacy as it is about war. Winning hearts here may matter as much as winning battles. Afterward, the battlefield becomes silent once more, save for the grieving. Among your own losses is your beloved horse, Bucephalus. He carried you through this fight just as he had through the years, through Granicus, Issus, Gaugamela, but this was his last. You found a city in his honor, Bucephala, ensuring his name will never fade. Beside it, you establish another city, Nicaea, marking the victory itself. That night, as your camp settles under the Indian stars, you stand alone. You bury your battle companion with the honors of a soldier and a king. Staring into the sky, you breathe out the words that settle into your chest like iron. Not even death will follow me fast enough. The jungle presses in on all sides, thick and humid, swallowing the horizon. The rains are no longer storms that pass, they are constant, an endless sheet of water that soaks into everything. Every step slogs through mud or marsh. Every breath feels like it carries the weight of the air itself. Men drop from fever. The corpses of soldiers, yours and enemies alike, cannot be buried in the flooded ground. The jungle is alive with threats that move too quickly to fight: snakes, insects, sickness. Your army bleeds not from swords, but from the land itself. Yet, still, you push forward. For years, the stories have been the same. Beyond the Ganges lies something vast and unknowable, perhaps the very edge of the world. It isn't enough for you that kings fall, that the known territories belong to your empire. To stop now would be to accept that mankind and you are finite. You refuse that. If the Ganges marks the transition from the world of men to the realm of gods, then crossing it becomes your destiny. Each step deeper into the jungle moves you closer to proving all limits false. But with every mile gained, the strain on your army deepens. These are not faceless soldiers. They are men you have led for years. They are survivors of Issus, of Gaugamela, of the lands where the sands themselves caught fire. They fought for you across mountains, rivers, seas. They carry scars from 100 victories you made possible. They are veterans, hardened and loyal, but even loyalty buckles under exhaustion. At the Hephaestion River, the tipping point arrives. They stop, not out of disobedience, but desperation. You see it in their faces as they beg, plead, weep. They do not hide their fear. They do not try to mask their exhaustion. Some openly threaten to leave, to abandon the march altogether. They aren't breaking from discipline. They are crumbling under sheer survival instinct. You rage. Hot, sharp words lash from your mouth like weapons. You remind them of what they've endured, of how far they've come, of what they've become under your leadership. But this time, the fire in your voice doesn't carry the way it once did. You retreat to your tent, isolating yourself from the army, refusing to emerge for 3 days. You wait for them to come around, to bend to your will as they always have. But they don't. Their silence feels like a wall harder than any fortress. When you finally emerge, drained but calculative, it's with a single unsettling phrase: "We go back." The words fall with finality, and the tension in the camp releases all at once. Relief washes over your men, but for you, this pivot is not relief, it's a wound. This is the first time your will has been denied. The first time someone has told you no and forced you to listen. Before turning westward, you make your mark on the Hephaestion. You don't let the jungle have the last word. Along the riverbank, you order the construction of 12 colossal altars, monuments to the gods and to your halted ambition. They stand like a defiance against the thick jungle, testimony not to retreat, but to the height you reached before the turning point. They are not humility, they are a challenge. As your horse carries you away from the jungle, your eyes linger on the green expanse behind you. But your mind doesn't. Somewhere in the chaos of vines and rivers, your heart remains, searching still for the world's edge. You don't speak the thought, but it settles as a vow. I have not finished. The safe roads are behind you, lush, predictable, and forgiving. But you don't take them. No, you lead your army into the Gedrosian desert instead. It's not just a desert, it's a graveyard of dunes and heat where even the horizon bleeds uncertainty. No one knows exactly why you chose this path. To punish your soldiers after years of rebellion and frustration? To test them and yourself against something greater than any enemy? Or maybe it's simply because no one else would dare. Whatever the answer, your decision carves one truth into the sands. Returning as simply a king does not interest you. You must return as something more. The first days blister with heat. The sun lashes through the sky, remorseless. The sand does more damage than even weapons. It erodes morale, saps strength. Men stagger and fall, their shadows melting into nothingness. Water grows so scarce that every sip turns into an argument, every gulp a betrayal to those still waiting their turn. The camels, reliable beasts in most lands, begin to fold. Pack animals collapse under supplies meant to sustain the living, and so the supplies collapse too. The rancid smell of rotting provisions spreads as the hotter days creep forward. Yet you walk on foot with the rest of your army, your sandals scorching over the same agony that burns through their feet. The men see you there, beside them, and for a little while it keeps them moving. Then, one blistering day, a helmet filled with water, a miracle, appears in front of you. This is enough for a moment's reprieve, enough to quench your throat and remind you you're alive. What do? You stare at it for a heartbeat, then pour its contents directly into the dry, cracked sand. The water disappears faster than their hopes, but the gesture, it lasts. In one silent act, you tell your men, if your soldiers march thirsty, so do you. If they suffer, so will you. Only together will you make it out, or not at all. And for some, as impossible as it seems, this gesture is enough to push them forward just one more step. The Gedrosian desert does more than kill. It stretches time, stretches space. Days bleed into nights until you can no longer remember which burns hotter. Men begin to fall in numbers that rival the worst battles. The desert claims tens of thousands, some swallowed whole by heat, many by starvation. Their memories are etched into crumbling footprints, already sanded over. No army has ever crossed this wasteland, but that statistic doesn't help the dead or the living. And there is no prize. This isn't about conquest or plunder. This is something else entirely. Eventually, after what feels like the wear of decades, you see the edges of safety, a respite creeping over the horizon like a mirage turned real. Your soldiers stagger into settlements, shattered, skeletal, barely clinging to what they once were. Many will never recover, and yet those who survive have no doubts left in their hearts. You didn't just conquer Asia with them, you bled for Asia beside them. You are no longer a general they follow because of orders. You are their shared ordeal, proof of their strength through the suffering you chose to share. Finally, under a dying sun, you turn back to the endless dunes. Everything you gave lives there now, sewn into the grains of sand. The losses, the bitterness, the sheer inhuman costs etched themselves into your legacy. But in their wake also lies something fierce, something untouchable, the endurance to stare at death until it looked away. In a whisper, you remind yourself of what the gods sometimes do for those they've marked forever. The gods test only those they intend to make eternal, and in that moment, you believe it. You return to Babylon at the height of your power. Ahead of you stretches the city you've claimed as the heart of your empire. Its walls rise like the branches of a tree, spreading outward to hold the cultures you've unified. You are no longer simply a conqueror. You sit above nations as a god-king. Wherever you walk, men see silk, jewels, and symbols of every land you've ruled. Behind you, the languages of the world weave into a single chaotic song. Greek, Persian, Egyptian, Indian, they all follow you like shadows. Inside these walls, your vision comes to life piece by piece. Babylon is to be a city without equal, a place where no one loyalty dominates, where architecture, culture, and ideas intertwine as they never have before. You set the example, a Macedonian king in Persian robes on an Egyptian throne dreaming of Arabian sails. But even here, something feels incomplete. The further you stretch your ambition, the more restless you become. Arabia pulls at your thoughts, another frontier, another conquest to define your legacy. And beyond that, whispers of further worlds, lands unknown, waters unmapped. You begin to plan with the same intensity that won Asia. Massive fleets, canals stretching across rivers to bind oceans together. The blueprint for history itself. You will redraw the contours of the earth, unite it under your name, and leave your mark so deep it will never fade. Yet, beneath this grand vision, cracks begin to deepen. You drink more heavily now. The cups and feasts you once used to honor victories turn nightly, bottomless. Decisions grow harder to make, and trust doesn't come easily anymore. Those closest to you feel the difference without daring to speak it. And your body, once a weapon that seemed invincible, works against you. The years of wounds, exhaustion, and sleepless nights begin to whisper warnings in every ache. But it's more than physical. With Hephaestion no longer by your side, the sharp emptiness in your soul now hangs above all you do. The omens echo with unease. A man is found sitting silently on your throne. The gesture feels absurd at first, but the murmurs spread. What mortal would dare touch the seat of a god? In the temple, birds cry in patterns the priests say are unnatural, shrieking as if warning of something no one can quite see. You brush it all aside. The heavens have tested you with worse, and you've defied every prophecy written to contain you. What challenge could Babylon possibly offer? What fate could undo Alexander? The city darkens with time, the golden crown on your brow growing heavier. Ambition burns like fire inside you, but even the brightest flames must consume their own fuel. Without warning, your body betrays you. Fever overtakes you, a violent one, impossible to ignore. It comes in waves, making your skin slick with fire and your vision blur. Days pass in chaos for those around you, but for you, time itself seems meaningless. The cause of it all? No one knows. Poison, disease, or the sheer weight of your fate catching up to you. As you drift between moments of sharp lucidity and deep, haunting delirium, you feel the empire slipping from your hands. You've crossed the world, shattered armies, and bent nations, but none of that matters here. Inside your chambers, far from the chaos of life outside, you whisper, to the walls, to yourself, maybe to the gods. Have I reached the end of the world, or just the end of myself? You don't need to hear an answer to know it has always been both. The hall glows with flickering light from torches and lamps. Music fills the air, lyres, flutes, drums, accompanied by bursts of laughter from generals and companions seated around overflowing tables. Gold cups clink together as wine floods every conversation. You are at the center of it all, reclining in elegance, a life of conquest etched across your face. Tonight, you laugh louder than anyone, telling stories of battles fought, cities taken, plans for campaigns yet to come. But to those who know you, something about the night feels off. This isn't a celebration of past glories or future victories. This feels like goodbye. You drink deeply, more than usual. Every cup is raised first to Hephaestion, then to the gods, and finally to what you still claim is ahead: Arabia, new oceans, the edges of yet more maps. In their eyes, you are still the unshaken Alexander, the man who mastered every trial. But the truth weighs heavier on you than the crown now circling your head. The fire that once burned endlessly inside you is dimming. and the empty spaces left by it grow wider with every toast. As the feast carries on, the heat of the wine feels sharper against your skin. Your body begins to falter, the fever creeping back like an enemy sneaking past watchful gates. You rise from your couch, but stumble. Hands reach to help you, but you wave them away, trying to steady yourself. Before the night ends, your legs give out entirely. The proud warrior who once walked ahead of entire armies now needs others to carry him from the hall. You insist it is nothing, a passing sickness, just fatigue. After all, what illness could dare challenge the one who conquered worlds? By morning, it's clear this is more than exhaustion. Your fever builds, fierce waves of heat and shivering cold racking your body. Your voice fades. By the second day, you lose the strength to speak. You become a prisoner in your own body, unable to command, to assure, or to demand. One by one, your generals come to your bedside, their expressions caught between disbelief and sorrow. Great men who faced untold dangers at your side now bow their heads in silence. Some weep openly, others can't bring themselves to meet your gaze. In your final hours, Perdiccas stands closest, and when you faintly lift your hand, your signet ring passes to him. Yet, when the inevitable question of succession falls over the room, you give no name. They lean in, their faces a blur through the haze of your fever, desperate for clarity. Instead, you whisper only 3 words: "To the strongest." Too soft for triumph, too cryptic for order. Yet those words will tear apart everything you spent a lifetime building. The wars fought for conquest will be nothing compared to the wars fought for your empty throne. As the fever consumes you and the final moments press closer, your mind drifts far from the room, far from the kings and soldiers gathered around. Not to maps or battles, not to treasures or cities, but back to the things you cherished most. You think of Bucephalus, the untamed horse who once carried you into greatness. You think of Hephaestion, the boy who rode beside you, who understood you better than anyone ever could. And you think of a simpler time in Macedon, when you were just a boy, dreaming of Troy, longing to become something greater than myth. The room pales into darkness, and the sounds around you blur. Yet, you feel no fear, no struggle. It's not defeat, it's completion. As your eyes close for the final time, a single thought remains, quiet yet unwavering. Let them say, "I lived like fire." You are gone, but your name does not leave with you. Across the world, your death spreads like a spark igniting wildfire. In Babylon, the streets fill with mourning, soldiers and citizens alike stunned not only by the loss of their king, but by the uncertainty that has been left behind. In Egypt, priests chant in temple halls, offering prayers to a god who had once walked among them. In Greece, the news arrives with a question that cuts sharper than grief itself. What happens now? Who holds the world you built? Your empire was vast, but your instructions in the end were cruelly simple. When your generals knelt at your bedside begging to know who would rule in your place, you gave them nothing more than 3 final words: "To the strongest." What could have been clarity, instead becomes chaos. They take it literally. The great assembly of your closest commanders becomes a fracturing, tense, and explosive. Friends turn against each other as ambition takes over. each man claiming they were the strongest, and therefore the rightful heir to your throne. What begins as heated division soon spirals into war. Macedonians, once brothers in shared conquest, now wield blades against one another. The unity you fought to create shatters as battle lines are drawn not across the lands you conquered, but within them. The very empire you forged with blood and brilliance starts to unravel, this time under the weight of greed and pride. Even your body, lifeless though it is, becomes a prize fought over. You were supposed to be returned to Macedon for burial, laid to rest in the land of your birth. But Ptolemy, one of the generals you trusted, decides otherwise. He intercepts your golden sarcophagus in its journey home and takes it instead to Egypt. It is entombed in Alexandria, the city that bears your name, the place you hoped would stand as your legacy. He knows the truth. To claim your remains is to claim a piece of your divinity, a symbol of power too great to ignore. Even in death, kings cannot resist fighting over you. In 11 years, you built history's most extraordinary empire. In less than 5, it unravels. The territories you united are sliced apart by wars fought between once allied generals. The Seleucids rise in Persia, the Antigonids in Macedon, Ptolemies in Egypt. Portions of your world become kingdoms built off the fragments of what you left behind. Yet no matter how far they reach, no matter how much they take, none of them escape your shadow. Statues rise, too many to count. In some cities, they treat you as one of their gods, not just a king. Your name becomes legend, whispered in prayers, written in scrolls. Rome, centuries later, will gaze upon what you achieved with something nearing worship. They will model conquest after you, thinking your legacy something to replicate. They will never come close. Napoleon himself will study your campaigns, your impossible victories, your craft of strategy, and pronounce himself your heir in spirit. But even for him, it is unreachable. You were not just a man, you were a storm, a force of nature that reshaped the map itself. You began as a prince with a dream. You died a god, sealed in gold. And while the kings of the earth tear apart the lands you left to them, while the world fractures into pieces, your story continues. History itself bends around your memory. You burned brighter than any flame, and long after, they still feel your heat. Alexander's story didn't end with his empire. It began with his imagination. In just 11 years, he reshaped the world, not by conquering land, but by defying limits. If you want more stories like this, subscribe and step into history like you've never seen it before.